The most ordinary Christian here today can be a godly person. Doesn't matter how old you are. You can be up in your 80s or you can be a teenager today. You may have been saved just for a few months, or maybe you've been saved for decades. You might be an introvert. Some of you might be an extrovert. But I want you to know you can be a godly person. When it comes to living a godly life, the question is not, can you? The question is, will you? That's important. Because as I've just read, 2 Peter 1 and verse 3 says, God has given to us everything necessary to live a godly life. So the question is not, can you be godly? Because the answer to that would be, yes, you can. The question is, will you? Will you commit to live a godly life? Will you choose a godly lifestyle over an ungodly lifestyle? Here's what I've learned over the years. A Christian will never accidentally become godly. Say, well, you know, I wasn't trying, but just one day I woke up and I was godly. Doesn't work that way. Godliness, spiritual growth, spiritual development in your life does not happen by accident. Go to 1 Timothy 6. You're in Titus. Go back a few pages to 1 Timothy chapter 6 and look at verse 11. Listen to what Paul says in this verse. He's writing to young Timothy, and he says, "But thou, O man of God, flee these things and follow after righteousness." And then what is the next word? Godliness, faith, love, patience, meekness. If you're in the habit of marking your Bible, I want you to circle those two words, follow after, because they mean that we are to pursue. We are to pursue. Now notice what we are to pursue. The topic that I'm dealing with, godliness. We are to pursue godliness. Now that word implies that if we are going to live godly lives, it's going to take some determination. It's going to take some perseverance. And the reason why is because everything in the world around us works against what God is trying to accomplish in your life. We are to be godly people living in an ungodly world. Immediately, some of you might say, well, that's not the way everybody else is living. That's not the way everybody else thinks. That's not the morals or the priorities or the values that those around me embrace. I understand that. We are living in the midst of a wicked and perverse world. We are living in a cesspool of ungodliness. And yet God is challenging us in the middle of ungodliness to be godly. Let me give you a definition of godliness, and then I want to give you a demonstration of godliness. Two things, and then we're going to close. Number one, the definition. Godliness is a deep devotion to God that results in a life that is pleasing to God. Now, I want you to really digest that because I want to talk about it a little bit, and then I want you to understand this is the definition we're going to use in the upcoming weeks, all right? Godliness is a deep devotion to God that results in a life that is pleasing to God. Now, let me tell you something very interesting, but I see it all the time, and I want you to know that what I'm about to state to you is totally possible. And that is, it's possible to attend church and not be deeply devoted to God and thus not be pleasing to God. It's possible. It's possible for you to come to church every week and not really be devoted to God. And I say that because we see the external, but God sees the heart. And sometimes we're all about putting on the image, and God is concerned about our heart. It's possible to even serve in some capacity here at the church and yet not be deeply devoted to God and thus not be pleasing to God. It's possible to give an offering We gave of our tithes and our missions offering, and we gave of our substance to God today. But it's possible to give an offering and not be a very godly person, not be deeply devoted to God, and thus not be pleasing to God. Godliness is a byproduct of our relationship with God. I want you to understand that. Relationship is important. We'll talk more about that relationship in a moment, but we have to have a relationship with God, and we have to have a deep, firm conviction and devotion, a commitment to God that results in godliness in our life. I have never seen a godly person who was not deeply devoted to God. That's flipping the definition around. But let me repeat that. I have never seen a godly person who was not deeply devoted to God. Are you devoted to God this morning? I want you to ask yourself that question, because I'm going to come back to it at the end of this message. Are we completely devoted to God? I'm talking about every aspect of our life. If you want to be a godly person, that's where it all begins. It all begins with a devotion to God.